The wind across the Montana high plains carried the smell of death long before anyone saw it. Caleb Whitaker stepped out of his pickup at the edge of the south pasture and felt his stomach drop clean through the soles of his boots. 42 head of Black Angus lay scattered like broken toys, bellies bloated, legs stiff in the cold October dawn. Their tongues, black and swollen, protruded from foam-flecked mouths. He didn't need the vet to tell him what it was. He knew the taste of that poison from 20 years ago, when the same thing happened to his father's herd the week before the bank foreclosed. He knelt beside the nearest carcass, ran a gloved hand over the brand on its hip circle, and felt a old rage crawl up his spine. Someone had cut his fence in 3 places, driven in under cover of night, and spread monensin bait like a farmer sowing wheat. Expensive cattle, 2 years of breeding, gone in 6 hours. $120,000 rotting under a sky the color of tarnished silver. Caleb stood up slowly, eyes scanning the ridge. That was when he noticed the small boot print in the soft dirt near the water. Gap, child-sized, fresh. He followed the prints up the draw, past the willows, until they disappeared into the tall grass that led to the old line shack his grandfather had built in 1938. The door was cracked open. Inside, something moved. "Come on out," he said, voice flat. "I ain't gonna hurt you." A girl stepped into the light. Maybe 10, maybe 12, it was hard to tell under the dirt and the oversized Carhartt coat that hung to her knees. Her hair was the color of winter wheat, tangled and matted, and her eyes were the pale blue of a glacier lake. She held a rusted .22 rifle, older than she was, pointed at his belt buckle. "I saw what they'd done," she said. Her voice didn't shake, but her knuckles were white on the stock. Caleb raised both hands. 70. Lily watched from the doorway. Crowley's ranch sat on 42,000 dead acres plus another 60,000 of lease state and BLM land. Land that bordered Caleb's place on 3 sides. For 20 years the Crowleys had been trying to buy the circle. Every offer lower than the last. Caleb pulled the plat maps and spread them on the counter. The clerk, a woman he'd gone to high school with, glanced over his shoulder. "They'll get it eventually," she said quietly. "Everyone does." "Not this time," he answered. That afternoon he drove out to the Crowley ranch. The gate was iron, 10 feet high, with a camera and a keypad. He sat in his truck until a cowboy on a 4-wheeler came out to see what he wanted. "Tell Harlan I need to talk," Caleb said. The cowboy smirked. "Mr. Crowley, don't take walk-ins. Tell him it's about the girl who saw his nephew cut my fence." The smirk vanished. 10 minutes later, the gate swung open. Harlan Crowley waited on the porch of a house that looked like a hunting lodge on steroids, log beams, elk antlers, a bronze statue of a rearing stallion. He was 60, thick through the chest, with a white beard and eyes the color of creek ice. "Whitaker," he said. "Heard you had some trouble." "You heard right." Harlan lit a cigarette. "Shame about those cattle. Grass tetany, maybe? Bad year for it. Monensin. Expensive way to kill cows. Expensive way to send a message." Harlan smiled without warmth. "If I wanted your place, son, I'd just wait for the bank to take it." "Why waste good poison?" "Because the bank moves slow and you're impatient." Harlan studied him for a long moment, then flicked the cigarette into the gravel. "You always were a stubborn little shit. Just like your daddy." "My daddy's dead." "Yeah, and you're fixing to join him if you keep poking around my family." Caleb stepped closer. "Tell your nephew the next time he comes on my land, he'd better bring more than 3 men and a bag of bait." Harlan's smile returned. "But be careful, boy. Accidents happen." That night Caleb sat on the porch cleaning his grandfather's Winchester 70. Lily watched from the doorway. "Put that down before you shoot your toe off, kid." She didn't. 3 men. Black truck. No plates. They wore masks, but one of 'em had a tattoo on his neck. Snake wrapped around a pitchfork. Caleb felt the cold settle deeper than the wind. He knew that tattoo. Everyone in Carbon County did. It belonged to the Crowley family meth cookers, cattle rustlers, and general poison since the 1890s. The sheriff looked the other way 'cause Harlan, Crowley's cousin, sat on the county commission, and Harlan paid for half the new football stadium. You got her name? He asked. Lily, she said, then added, just Lily. Where's your folks? She looked past him at the dead cattle. Gone. He understood gone. He'd been gone himself at 12 when his mother overdosed and his father drank himself into the ground after the first poisoning. Caleb had been raised by a grandmother who chewed Copenhagen and quoted scripture in the same breath. You hungry? He asked. She lowered the rifle a fraction. 2 hours later she sat at his kitchen table eating beans and cornbread like she hadn't seen food in a week, which she probably hadn't. The coat was off now. Underneath she wore 3 shirts and a pair of boys' jeans held up with twine. Her wrists were bird thin. You can stay in the bunkhouse, Caleb said, but you pull your weight. Chickens need feeding, horses need currying. We clear? She nodded, mouth full. That night he called the insurance adjuster, the vet, and the sheriff in that order. The adjuster promised to be out next week. The vet confirmed monensin and toxicity and took samples for the state lab. The sheriff said he'd look into it and asked if Caleb had any enemies. Caleb hung up without answering. 3 days later the bank called. The note on the ranch was due in 60 days. The herd had been the collateral. Without cattle there was no way to pay. The voice on the phone was polite, almost kind. They'd hate to foreclose on a 5th-generation outfit, but business was business. Caleb poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and stared out at the dark mountains. He thought about selling the place, taking what he could, and disappearing to Wyoming or New Mexico where nobody knew the Whitaker name. Then he thought about Lily asleep in the bunkhouse with a .22 under her pillow, and he poured the bourbon down the sink. The next morning he drove into town. Red Lodge was 20 miles of winding road, a strip of false front buildings and tourists buying huckleberry jam. He parked in front of the courthouse and walked into the assessor's office.